I sent for Louis. On the way back home, Jack asked me if I enjoyed the last couple of months. I said yes, it went too fast, and I didn't want to leave. Still, in the back of my mind, I kept dealing with a certain nagging anxiety. Was this a dream? When will it end? How can any of it be real? I shook my head as I peered out the front of Louis. After a short pause I said, right now, I find myself conflicted, phasing between here and reality on Earth. Sometimes, I am like a scrap of paper torn in half. Honestly, I don't know how much more I can take. I would love to forget myself here in Sierra. It is so incredible. Yet, I understand I am going back. Therefore, I can't let go of the Earth, or my kids, or family, as in my mind and heart I am still battling for their salvation. I would love for now to be now, and there would be nothing to go back to. Jack replied, I can only imagine the turmoil you are suffering, after experiencing what you have since coming here. Shouldn't that make you more determined to encourage your children and others to find heaven? Tell them how it is full of hope, joy, and peace of mind. I believe you are torn because you are seeing the effects, the potential of hope, joy, and true peace, compared to the old world, which is quickly disintegrating. Yes, you are going back, but you will go back with a message. Hold on to your message when you are feeling double-minded. Jack, where do you fit into all of this? Please forgive me for asking now, but you know that I don't remember everything about you. Yet, you have been such a big part of everything I have done here. You're the biggest mystery. You're everywhere. How is that? I asked. Let me try to explain, he said as his voice changed to another language I did not understand. Never mind, I can't understand a thing you are saying. I guess that is information for another time, I replied. Thanks for helping me through this, Jack. No problem, bro. I would remain in the dark where Jack was concerned. He was an enigma. That didn't trouble me because it was more of a curiosity than anything else. I paused, thought of my kids and smiled. It was so unbelievable. At the moment, I didn't know what to do or how to think. Jack, sensing my feelings, changed the subject and said, I love spending time with George and Beth. I feel like I am one of the family too. Before I could respond to him, he got another one of his peculiar looks on his face as if to tell me something new. Hey, I would like to show you something cool, something blue, and something remarkable. He murmured to Louis. With that, a blue flash accompanied by another, we were sitting in a blue sky. It was a blue sky all around us, as far as I could see. I saw 4 suns, 3 on the one side and 1 colossal sun on the other. Jack said, the chemical composition of the surrounding space, within the suns, suppressed their brightness, and caused the area between them to produce a perfect blue sky. Unlike on Earth where the sky is blue due to reflection, this is chemically induced. He paused and looked around, and said, I recently found this place. I call it Blue Heaven. There is only one planet within the group of stars. It is a gigantic quarter planet with no surface land mass. Jack told Louis to take us to the other end, straight ahead he said. Once we got there, Jack explained, the 3 smaller suns and the water planet orbit the one larger sun. Like he said, it was all water. It appeared the same size as the largest sun within the group. Water vapor was escaping its gravity, creating a line of clouds, massive cumulus clouds in space. A considerable section of them were streaming away from the planet. We entered the atmosphere, which had a steady rainfall. The sunlight created rainbows on all sides of us. I could see lightning striking everywhere. Jack opened the exit hatch to Louis. I panicked. He said, don't worry, Jeff. Within the exosphere the atmosphere is breathable. Then he asked, isn't it thrilling and weird at the same time? It is beautiful, I replied. I stuck my head out the exit. The air was humid with the intense smell of dusty rain. It smelled of the first train, mingled with a dusty road, after a long hot dry spell. Lightning struck near me as I was taking in a deep breath. I pulled my head back in immediately and returned to the bridge with my hair standing straight up. Jack looked at me and turned his head away. I was positive he was laughing. We hovered in place for a while, and then Jack asked Louis to drop to the surface. We traveled across the vast ocean, staying at least 200 feet above the water to evade the 100-foot waves crashing with such unimaginable force below us. Jack stopped Louis above the waves. He walked to the hatch and opened it. He turned to look at me and then fell backwards out of the craft. I ran to the hatch afraid he might injure himself as he plunged into the heavy seas below. I forgot he was immortal. I watched for a while. It was all I could to not to jump, as he swam to the top of the waves, and slide down into the depths. I lost it when I saw him standing atop a huge wave riding it across the surface. He looked up at me and waved. I could only imagine how it felt to do such a thing. Well, I couldn't take it any longer. I jumped. Once I hit the water, I saw nothing but waves as they crashed over me. It was all I could do to keep breathing. Jack came and stood beside me. "Jeff," he shouted, "where's your faith?" I reached up for a hand. He grabbed my hand and raised me above the waves. The ocean felt like solid ground below me while he held on. It was so cool riding on top of the waves. We did so for at least 2 hours. Every other wave, Jack would let go of me, letting me body surf down to the belly of the wave. Then, he would come and take my arm and we would ascend to the top of the next wave. While on top of an extremely high wave, I called for Louis and he came down low enough for us to climb back into the craft. Well, we didn't actually climb. Jack grabbed a hold of the scruff of my shirt and pants and tossed me back into Louis, causing me to tumble across the deck. He was able to climb back in without any trouble. Once back in Louis, Jack said how exhilarating. It wore me out, but I agreed with him. As with many things Jack, or any immortal, could do compared to my mortal self was so different. The immortal abilities were mind-bending, and although I have seen enough for myself, it still stretched the imagination beyond my capacity to comprehend. As we traveled across the surface, we came upon an area of smooth seas where the clouds were opened above. Beams of sunlight were breaking through to the water below. Jack whispered again to Louis. Louis dropped into the water. I hadn't tried that before, taking Louis into an ocean. Within 2 minutes, 2 whale sharks passed the front of Louis. We came across an underwater mountain, the top of which was only 50 feet underwater. I guess that is what Jack meant by no surface land. Its peak was flat and overgrown with a substantial kelp bed. Other kinds of water plants flourished on its sides, down into the depths. We couldn't see the bottom as it was too dark. We came upon several land masses right below the surface. I speculated if the water keeps floating into space, it will not be long before islands appear. There were many areas where the earth was only 30 feet below the ocean's surface. Some practically had beaches. Various kinds of colorful coral and seaweed were growing on all the exposed rock. We watched a massive school of herring pass by. It must have been 50 miles long. Predatory fish were darting in and out of the school. A group of them looked like yellow and bluefin tuna. One of the bluefin had to be over 1,000 pounds. It assailed the glass dome of Louis, right above my head. It hit, stopped, and didn't move for a minute. I suppose it stunned itself. We continued our underwater sightseeing until an enormous squid came after us. He couldn't hurt us, but we didn't want him hanging on to Louis when we left the planet. He was quick and almost at us until I told Louis to get going. Afterward, we went back up to the surface and followed the trail of clouds escaping the planet, streaming for thousands of miles until they turned into a vapor, a mist, and evaporate into the blue sky. Jack turned and said, "This is fantastic, isn't it? No one knows it's here other than me, now you." No sooner had he said so when an enormous platform sailed by containing buildings surrounded by fields under a dome. It looked like a covered cake platter. It was circular, and 2 miles in diameter. What a massive undertaking it must have been to build and launch such a platform into space. As we got closer, we noticed the grounds were wheat fields. It was a space-traveling wheat farm. Interestingly, there was a large oak tree right in the middle of the expansive field. It was massive. I wondered to myself if that wasn't a phenomenon with wheat fields. Does every wheat field have its resident oak tree? Jack took a second look and said, it looks like a farmer is experimenting. Apparently, he has discovered my new place. I will have to inquire. He turned to the front panel on the bridge and said to Louis, Louis, please contact that craft below us. A voice came over the intercom. Hello, can I help you? Jack responded, Hi. How are you doing? And what are you doing? We are conducting tests on a new type of wheat, a strain of wheat we expect will withstand constant daylight without burning up, was his answer. Jack asked, why not conduct your experiment on one of the many planets that have constant daylight? The captain came back, it is easier to control the amount of light the wheat fields receive on this craft, and much harder to do so on the surface of a planet. Jack said, okay. Thanks for answering. Welcome, and good day to you, sir, they replied. Jack said, good day friend as he clicked off. I thought to myself, wasn't genetics a matter of the past? Although Sierra contained 136 habitable planets, such was not the actual case. Thousands of planets in Sierra can sustain life and people can live on them. A few people do, but most of them had longer or shorter days, months or years. A couple hundred of them had no night at all. There were 6 popular planets in the system that sunset and sunrise took place within a half hour to an hour of each other. Those planets had suns that were perfectly placed on opposite sides of the planet to bring about that effect. Instead of circling a sun, those planets sat and spun in one place between 2 suns. There were 3 other planets where it was always sunset as the suns followed the horizon in a 360-degree rotation. Those planets circled in such a way that only the northern hemisphere faced the sun at an angle. When visiting their north poles, you would experience sunset in every direction throughout its rotation. One side, the bottom side, was constant darkness with sub-zero temperatures. The top side of the planets ranged from a consistent 80 to 95 degrees. There are thousands of other planets somewhere in between with longer or shorter days or nights, or months and years. Throughout the universe, the basis for establishing whether a planet was habitable was if it met all the same time elements as Earth, such as 24-hour day, 360-day year. Each habitable planet identified a location, a zone which coordinated time with Jerusalem. They would erect a city or monument on that spot. All other time zones around the planet were based on that particular spot. Even though all the habitable planets in Sierra were of different size, the orbit and angle had to compensate for the same times and seasons consistent with Earth. Commerce is one of those cities, or sites on the planet which matched Jerusalem time. Jack turned, stared at me and said, I try to know what's going on in Sierra. It's what I do here. It's what you do here too. I responded, eventually, I would like to get involved with the commitments I am expected to be providing here. He answered, all right. Let's figure out how we can achieve that, but not at this moment. Before long, another craft with a dome came slowly cruising by. It was the size of 20 city blocks. Hundreds of people were inside lounging and roaming around. There appeared to be a wide walkway all around inside the dome. It had a hotel in the center. The ship looked like a resort, with inviting swimming pools at both ends. Palm trees and colorful bushes lined all the walkways. A group of people saw us as many came close to the edge of the dome and waved. We strolled down to the outside hall where the side windows were, so they could see us wave back. Given the expression on Jack's face, I could tell he was perplexed. It was hard to hold back the laugh. I assumed he thought he was the only one who knew this place was here, apparently not. In all the surrounding space, we came across 2 separate craft within 15 minutes of each other. Both were of similar type and in near proximity to one another. What were the odds? Because of their size, I mentioned to Jack, I would assume both crafts were built on transport, correct? He replied, yes. Jack looked at me as if he perceived how I would react by the next thing he said, many of their components are made by one or another industrial complex on the planet factory. Pause, wait for it. He said that for a reason. I caught a craving. I shouted at him, let's go to factory. Immediately, I had the desire to go there. I would like to go there, now. Factory, again no imagination for naming places, was the center of manufacturing and processing in Sierra. Pretty much anything made, except for handmade items, AI, and transportation vehicles came from factory. Most of the food we ate was processed there. The place was a regular destination in my dreams, especially the city of industry. The city was over 100 square miles of factories, showrooms and offices. I loved the ice cream factories there. After each tour, they offered you a good-sized bowl of their newest flavor. It was an advertising ploy, but it worked for me. Afterward, you would have to fill out a survey on unique aspects of the new flavor. It could take up to 2 years to come up with a new flavor, so you might fill out the same survey several times for each factory. Well, I would have to anyhow. Also, 2 years might sound like a long time. If desired, the company could generate a new flavor every few seconds. But, from the beginning of Sierra, citizens knew just because we could do anything instantly, it was not always the best way to do them. Sierrans understood the best and most desirable accomplishments in life are accomplishments we love spending our time doing or creating. Of course, that was not always the case throughout the whole universe. There were 2 types of humans. There are mortals, and there are immortals, but there was further grouping of immortals rarely mentioned by most of the inhabitants of Sierra. Those groups were the techs and the free spirits. Techs, like the Watchers, live like mortals here in Sierra. They purposely depended on appliances, furniture, supermarkets, anything built by a machine or mortal. A chair, for example, was a technological item. Someone, or some machine designed and built it. Techs, I like to say, are people who like the race, compared to others who like the finish line. Free spirits, although no immortal likes being called a free spirit, are immortals who like the finish line. They might live between heaven and Jerusalem. If they required anything, they would speak it into existence. No machinery or technology involved. Molecules were at their command. Of course, no immortal is 100% tech, or free spirit. The name calling of one or the other is based on one's propensity to live more one way than the other. Each is a preferred lifestyle. We went straight to the Manila ice cream factory, one of my favorites. I gave them a recipe I borrowed for an ice cream bar called the 1880. It was one of my favorites as a kid. They added it to their product line. The recipe made us best friends. Fortunately for me, a tour was just starting. We walked around with the tour guide for an hour. I got a hat and a t-shirt. Both had sizable pictures of ice cream cones on them. Jack had to keep nudging me along as I wanted to stop and watch each machine and specific process in the building. I wanted to talk with any person, or AI operating any and every apparatus. The workforce, throughout the Planet Factory, was mostly made up of specials. The other small minority of people were generally college students trying to earn extra money. Kids were not obligated to work while attending school. Yet, there were 3 days out of the week each might work should they want to do so. Frequently, one of them would come to appreciate factory work and stay on after college, often becoming a foreman or a position higher in the chain of command. Again, with too much to see, we often were left behind the tour group. I didn't mind as much as Jack did. There he goes pushing me again, and I am growing tired of him doing that. I wanted to see it all, and will go by myself next time. I demanded, Jack. Don't you have something else to do? His reply, what? Never mind. I answered. Eventually, we wrapped up our tour. We chose a seat in the factory's parlor, where we were offered a bowl of ice cream with the expected survey. I suppose I inhaled too much ice cream because I was feeling it and I was stuffed. They offered me a box of 1880 ice cream bars. Good thing Louis had a fridge in the galley, or I would have had to eat the entire dozen right away. No way would I waste them. The city of industry was only one of thousands of manufacturing cities. There were larger ones where meat and produce are processed. The largest factory on the planet was the power supply factory in the city of Power. I recall it was also one of my favorite places to tour. It was the factory that made fusion modules and energy cells which powered everything in Sierra. The fusion modules were small 4x4 by 2-inch cases containing a miniature nuclear fusion reactor. The small reactor was designed to dismantle or melt and draw the energy out of a single grain of sand or salt. Between the case and the reactor was a powerful magnetic field, which contained the controlled explosion or controlled disintegration of each atom from the fuel particle, sand or salt. The field itself looked like a dab of honey. It was a significant breakthrough when scientists figured out gravity was like a liquid. The heavier it was, the more solid it became. That tiny dab of honey felt like 30 pounds in your hand. The fusion was so controlled and cleanly done it left no noticeable nuclear waste. Then, there were the energy cells. The cells were used to power homes, appliances, lighting, heating, air conditioning, and anything which fell within a specific power category. The fundamental systems in one of my homes would run for 6 months on a single cell. At which time the cell would be replaced and the old one turned in for recharging, no limit on how many recharges a cell can have. Central systems incorporate heating and cooling, perhaps a water heater if needed. Other appliances and electrical type items used smaller cells for power. A stove or fridge would run up to 2 years on a single small energy cell. Power was never an issue in Sierra. Transport vehicles had to run on the fusion modules and could operate up to 2 months to a year on a single grain of sand. It depended on how many patterns each vehicle had to create. Most businesses and factories used the fusion modules since they required a great amount of energy to operate. Depending on the size of the user, a feeder for the module may hold up to hundreds of millions of grains of fuel, again sand or salt. If I neglected to mention, sand or salt were the most common elements used for fuel for the modules. Whole planets had surfaces composed of sand. Most of the factories would use up to 10,000 grains a day. Whole rooms would have multiple banks of modules, with their feeders, powering different sections of each building and its machinery. Not only were the modules heavy compared to their size, they vibrated in a circular motion in your hand. It was an odd feeling and hard to hold on to them. While eating my ice cream, I asked Jack about the modules. He spoke in French. I am sure it was French. I didn't understand a word he said. I asked the guy serving the ice cream if he knew anything. He said something about a blue lagoon and the love of his life. He walked away singing "The Night Has 1,000 Eyes." Oh boy. Well, after eating too much ice cream, I was in no frame of mind to undertake another tour. I can imagine it would take over 100 years of tours to see all of factory, so many places to see, everyone as exciting as the last. Each factory offers tours to the public and field trips for all schools throughout Sierra. It is a fascinating place, merging the old and the new. There was no reason to change anything if it worked. Besides, it was incredible to see all the machines at work. I was ready to go home. We boarded Louis and were on our way home. We boarded Louis and were on our way home. We boarded Louis and were on our way home.